You're quasi-evil. You're semi-evil. You're the margarine of evil. You're the Diet Coke of evil. Just 1 calorie, not evil enough.
What's up, April here, and welcome back to The Struggle is Real, my YouTube channel where I do TV and movie reactions and reviews, all for your viewing pleasure. And also mine. It is October, and you know what that means. It is spooky season, the time of year where almost every YouTube channel caves into the algorithm and decides to focus on horror or scare-related content to feed the masses. But don't worry. Here at The Struggle is Real, we will continue to stay true to ourselves and do the same content that we've been doing all along. Scary and horror-related content. Take that, YouTube algorithm. You're welcome. Today I'll be reviewing the Max original movie, Salem's Lot, based off of the Stephen King novel of the same name. Now, since the novel came out in 1975, there have been several iterations of Salem's Lot, both on the big and small screen. There's been a couple of miniseries, and now there's also this movie. And leading into watching the movie, I decided that I would go back and watch the 1979 miniseries that came out because I had only seen snippets of it when I was a kid, and so as an adult, I decided to watch the whole thing. Maybe I shouldn't have done that because I feel like it might have possibly set me up for a little bit of disappointment going into this movie. So for those of you that don't know, Salem's Lot, both the novel and the miniseries and this new movie, is about an author who comes back to his hometown, that being Salem's Lot, to write a new novel about this house that exists there. And in the process of him being back home, he discovers, along with some of the townspeople, that there is a bit of an infestation problem going on, and that being vampires, and the story goes from there. So with that being said, over the course of this review, I will be breaking down how I felt about it as a movie from a filmmaking standpoint, and just as a movie as a viewer. I'll be comparing the movie to the miniseries that existed in 1979, and also a little bit of how it dipped into the source material, all without spoilers. You're welcome. Now, off the bat, I did feel like the movie had really good cinematography. It did a really good job setting the tone for a town that has the potential to be inhabited by vampires. They did a really good job honing in on making things seem eerie. There were some really beautiful shots throughout the movie where I'm like, this looks great. Like, they really thought about, framing and composition over the course of some of these really good shots. Now, the movie and also the original source material is set in the 1970s. So you kind of have that 1970s groove feeling of a New England town with a smaller amount of inhabitants, and it sets that up fairly well. You also kind of get a sense that there's something amiss going on because the movie literally starts with something amiss going on, which are two gentlemen picking up this container that holds something nefarious. Obviously, we know that the nefarious thing is probably vampires, but that's not a spoiler. That's just how the movie goes. Another thing that I noticed about the movie was that the cast was really good. I didn't know who was in the cast going into the movie. I just decided to, put it on and go into the movie blind. But the cast of this movie was really solid. You have Louis Pullman, who is Bill Pullman's son. Bill Pullman obviously was in classics like Independence Day and Casper. I love Casper. But Louis Pullman has been making a name for himself over the past 10 years. He's been in everything from Top Gun Maverick to Bad Times at the El Royale, and he's also in the Amazon Prime series Outer Range, which is a really cool Western suspense horror show starring Josh Brolin. If you haven't seen it, definitely check that out too. So I was really interested to see him in this leading role and see what he would bring to the table. Also, rounding out the cast, you have Alfre Woodard. I don't even think I need to go into how amazing and iconic this woman's work is. I could have watched the movie based off of her alone had I looked up the cast ahead of time. There's also other amazing and notable actors and actresses rounding out this cast that I was very excited to see once the movie got going. So I was like, okay, this is gonna be cool. So yeah, and then it just kind of fell flat. Outside of the cinematography and the cast, I just felt like the movie was a little bit hollow. You have this incredible cast that you're working with, but there was no character development on any of the characters. It just kind of went from one scene to the next scene to the next scene. So when things started happening to these characters over the course of the movie, and obviously the threat of these vampires became more and more prevalent, and things are happening to these people, I don't feel anything. You know, the whole point of character development is so that when something happens to a character in a movie or TV show, you actually feel some type of anything, something, a connection, some type of like, oh man, I wish that person made it, or, you know, oh wait, no, like, yeah, fight, something. And I just didn't feel that with any of the characters. And the reason for that being is because there was absolutely no character development outside of Lewis Pullman's character, who's playing the author, and that's about it. All we know about him is that he came back to his hometown. He's writing this new book about the mansion, the Marston House, that exists in this town, and the Marston House is the scene of the crime for all of these, you know, very strange occurrences and things that are happening. And that's about it. It's the only person whose character is really fleshed out. Actually, that's not true. There is one other character over the course of the movie who gets at least somewhat something of a backstory. And that is the character of Mark Petrie, played by actor Jordan Preston Carter. In the movie, Mark is presented as a new kid in town. He gets bullied just, you know, from being new, and he has an interest in magic and comic books. And when all of these strange occurrences, you know, start going on, he kind of has a little bit of insight, only because he's reading all these comics and he's kind of interested in, you know, the strange and the occult and the weird. So it's not too much outside of his, you know, realm of thinking when these things start going on. He's the only other character that got even a little bit of character development. Outside of that, and Lewis Pullman's character, there was nothing. There was no character development, and it just felt so hollow. And I was really disappointed by that. I was a little disappointed for several reasons. Obviously, if you know how much the source material is, even if you've never read the book or seen the miniseries, you know that most Stephen King novels are pretty heavy. And Stephen King is one of the most descriptive authors there is. He is so verbose when it comes to describing the settings of things, the character development, everything that's going on in a certain place, location, characters, anything like that. So to see these characters be so hollow, I knew that the movie itself was like skimping on what could have been really good character development, especially because the movie was just shy of 2 hours. Like, this movie was 1 hour and 54 minutes, okay? Now, most horror movies live within 1:30 to 2 hours. Once you start going to a 2 hour range, you know, or over 2 hours, you better have a really good reason for having the runtime be that way. Like, there needs to be either some type of development with characters, place, world building, etc. The fact of the matter is, because this movie actually takes place in the real world, and all you're setting up is the fact that there's a creepy house and there might possibly be vampires amiss, you need to spend some time doing some type of character development, and that was completely null and void. And I really felt like they missed an opportunity, especially with such an incredible cast, to develop these characters and make the audience, you know, feel something, so that by the time, you know, these events start happening to these characters, we're able to grab onto that and feel something. I mean, there are shorter horror movies that did a better job developing characters than this movie did with a longer runtime. Perfect example, the original Fright Night that came out in the 1980s was like 1 hour 45 minutes long, roughly. But over the course of that movie, they developed several characters. They developed the main character, who you see is like, you know, trying to like look for this girl, but also he's got this new neighbor that's super weird. You're developing the dude who lives next door, who, spoiler alert if you've never seen Fright Night, it's a vampire. Like, literally, he finds out his neighbor's a vampire. That's the premise of the movie, okay? But you also develop the vampire that's living next door. You're developing the character of this horror TV show host who used to act as a vampire hunter too. So in the shorter runtime, you've developed enough characters that by the time the movie goes along, you're understanding these characters' motivations. And when I was watching Salem's Lot, I felt absolutely none of that. There was nothing that would lead me to believe like why this character would make this decision, why this would happen. And it was just it just fell flat for me in that way. Now, compared to the 1979 miniseries, here's the thing. Obviously, when you're doing a miniseries, you are allotted more time. Now, just a side note, I will be focusing on the 1979 miniseries because there was also a 2004 miniseries starring Rob Lowe. I did not see that, so I will not be mentioning that in this review. Now, obviously, when you have a miniseries, just off the bat, you're able to have more time. The 1979 miniseries was 3 hours, so just off of that, you have an extra hour that you didn't get with this new 2024 movie. And in that extra hour of the miniseries, they were able to develop the characters a lot more. They were able to take more from the source material and actually like draw it out, the actual town. More characters are able to get a backstory, more motivations, you're able to see what's going on. There's also a lot more world building in the town of Salem's Lot than you get in the movie, which, considering that the movie is called Salem's Lot, you'd want to develop the town a little bit better. One thing that the miniseries did better than the movie, I'd say, is in terms of the Marston house, which is the house where all of the creepy stuff is going on and where all of the vampiric things are happening. In the movie, you know, the house it's a house on a hill. It looks like, okay, this is a big house. Something spooky might be happening, but you could say that for any big house. You could just be like, this is a big house. It looks scary. Ah. But in the 1979 miniseries, that house was made to look really creepy. The outside of it looked really daunting. It almost looked like one of those houses that if you're a kid and you're riding your bike past, you're just like, nah, we're gonna have to ride a little bit faster because I don't really want to be around this house too much. And in both the movie and the original, miniseries, the house has been vacant for a really long time. That in and of itself kind of is a cause for concern. Why has this house been vacant for so long? You find out it's because, some things went down in the house and no one's ever wanted to live there. But in the miniseries, you kind of see that decrepitness and it kind of makes the house in and of itself foreboding, that it's empty. And even though these people end up living there, it still is foreboding and no one still kind of wants to go near or around it. And I felt like making the house that daunting and creepy was something that was really left out of the movie, and they definitely could have used the 2 hours to emphasize the creepiness of the house. If you're not going to develop the characters, develop the house. At least do something. And then they had good cinematography, but the most important thing that should have been utilized with that is portraying this house, and they didn't do that as well as they could have either. In the miniseries, one of the final scenes of the series is a showdown at or inside of the house. And when you finally get a look inside of the house, because you don't really get to see the innards of the house outside of the basement over the course of the miniseries. And finally, like in the last half an hour, you really get to see what the inside of the house looks like. And it is creepy as hell. It looks decrepit. It looks like people have died there. Obviously, people have clearly died there. It looks horrid. And the movie just fell flat. It just looked like an old house. There was nothing creepy or foreboding about it. It just looked like, well, okay, we're in an old decrepit house. And it just, so many missed opportunities with this movie. It was just so disappointing that what it could have been, especially considering how hefty the source material is. It was kind of mind-blowing. Now, obviously, I've stated that the characters weren't developed nearly as much as they were developed in the miniseries. However, that doesn't mean that I didn't appreciate the actors' portrayals of those characters. Now, obviously, some things were changed in the original source material and in the TV series, miniseries. In the original source material and also in the miniseries, the character that Alfre Woodard is playing originally is a man, but the fact of the matter is that she's playing a doctor. That's also in the original source material. It's a doctor, and they're trying to, let the doctor know that some stuff is going on and prove to the doctor that, hey, there's vampires. I know scientifically that seems crazy, but believe us. So I did really appreciate her portrayal of, this doctor that, is trying to put aside the laws of science for a second and really look at the situation as it being, unbelievable, but grasp the situation and then act accordingly. But I did like her portrayal of the Doctor, but I feel like that's more so because I like Alfre Woodard, and she just did a good job with the material that she was given. There's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie that includes her character, which is when she's coming to terms with the fact that some vampire ish is happening. Her reaction is just top tier.
Danny.
Oh, hell. Also in the mini-series from the 70s, the actor who played Mark was a little bit older, so he was definitely headstrong and independent in the things that he wanted to do. And I felt like the actor who played Mark in the new version, Jordan Preston Carter, did a really good job embodying that. As I said before, he is one of the few characters that got just a smidgen more of character development, and he acted accordingly. You could really see that he used the knowledge of the things that he already liked in his life to just be like, absolutely not to these vampires. He was very independent. He was very gung-ho in terms of trying to get stuff done and making sure that he and those that he loved were not victims of what was going on. But I really appreciated his portrayal of the character, and to me it was one of the highlights of this movie. I also really enjoyed the actor who played the priest in this movie, John Benjamin Hickey, but once again there was no development. You get the smallest amount just as the movie starts, that as a priest he might be struggling with certain aspects of his faith, which in the miniseries and in the source material is a lot more important, and you don't get that at all in this. Just in the little beginning, and then like one more time later, and that's about it. No more. It's just disappointing. And Lewis Pullman, obviously with the material that he was given, tried to do the best that he could. But once again, his character was underdeveloped. You know about him as an author because it's literally following his character, but he could have done so much more if he was given more of the source material to play off of. But to me, the most disrespectful and underutilized part of the cast was the actor who they got to play Straker, which was basically, you know, the vampire lord's familiar. Every good vampire has a familiar, and this was his. The actor that played him, I'm so sorry if I butcher this man's name. I'm going to say it to the best of my ability. Is Palu Asbeck. For any of you out there that have watched Game of Thrones, you will definitely recognize him. He played Euron Greyjoy, I believe, and he is a really good actor. So seeing him as Straker, knowing how important that character is, I was excited. I was like, oh, this is incredible casting. And then they didn't use him. Like, he was in like two really good scenes. One scene where the cinematography was just amazing scene. And then once again, criminally underutilized the cast of this movie. And to me, that was one of the biggest issues. You have this incredible cast and you just completely didn't even...
Just standing around not doing much.
Like, why are they there? For what? For who? Now, in terms of the differences between the movie and the source material, I kind of highlighted a little bit of those going over the differences between the movie and the miniseries because those changes were also the same. But something that really kind of stuck out to me as problematic in terms of nailing the tone and character development was the relationship between Ben, the author who Lewis Pullman is playing, and the teacher in the town, Mr. Burke. Now, in the original source material and obviously the miniseries, Mr. Burke was Ben's teacher when he was growing up in Salem's Lot as a kid. So when he comes back to the town and he's this accomplished author, Mr. Burke is really proud of him, and when things start going wrong in the town in terms of the vampire infestation, obviously Ben and Mr. Burke have this, alliance and this kinship because they've known each other for several decades. In the movie, unfortunately, they didn't have that relationship. Mr. Burke was just a regular teacher in the school at Salem's Lot, and so when Ben came back, he just struck up a random friendship with this teacher, but you kind of lose this depth of character and this existing relationship that if they would have just put that in the movie, that would have already helped build some type of character development because you know, bare minimum, that these characters already have an existing history. So the rapport that they have is because they already knew each other for several years. But taking that away in the movie, I don't even know why that creative choice was done. And to me, it didn't even really make any sense either, that you have a relationship that is built on this foundation. And so when these things start happening, they're able to trust one another. The relationship in the movie was just built off of nothing. It's just a teacher talking to someone that used to live there. And it was kind of an unnecessary creative change that really could have helped develop the already underdeveloped characters in this movie. I don't know how many times I'm going to say the characters were underdeveloped, but I feel like y'all get it. Overall, I felt like the 2024 Salem's Lot was just a complete and utter missed opportunity at really good source material. Now, to be honest, a lot of Stephen King's novels, as I've said before, are pretty hefty, and I think that since Hollywood has been developing his novels and short stories and novellas for literally like 40 years, you would know which ones of those would be better done as a TV show, which ones would be done as a miniseries, which ones should be done as a movie. You'd think by this time Hollywood would get which ones, just based off of the heft of the book, which would be better served in which category. I mean, you have things like It, which are obviously very hefty and were turned into both a miniseries and a 2-part movie. And then you have other things like Misery and The Mist, which were able to be put in shorter, movies. But with Salem's Lot, where the source material is really hefty, I feel like they could have easily made this into a miniseries instead. You already had a great cast. You clearly had production value. You clearly had a budget. If you would have just tacked on another hour and just made this a miniseries, they could have been able to do so much more with the source material. You really would have been able to see the cast shine with these incredible characters that already exist and just make the town of Salem's Lot come to life and really bring to life the source material. But I just overall feel like this movie was a complete and utter missed opportunity. Underutilized the cast, were not able to get any type of character development whatsoever, and just a complete waste of really good source material. So I'd say if you're fans of the original Salem's Lot, like the book, you're probably going to be very disappointed at this adaptation. I think if you're fans of the original 1979 miniseries, you're probably going to wonder what the hell happened. And if you are just a normal person watching this as a movie, you're probably going to be like, oh, that looks pretty, but why are all these characters completely and utterly underdeveloped? Because at the end of the day, this movie just felt hollow. Like, it felt like a shell of what Salem's Lot could have possibly been. Like a smidgen of Salem's Lot. Like, it felt like Salem's Lot Lite. Like the light version. And if you want the full version, either watch the miniseries or read the book. I don't know what to tell you. But anywho, thanks so much for joining me for this review of 2024's Salem's Lot. If you're interested in watching this movie, it is currently available as of the posting of this video to stream on Max. Have you seen Salem's Lot yet? Are you interested in seeing it? Have you seen the original 1979 miniseries? Have you read the novel? Do you know the source material? Either way, let me know about it in the comment section below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, more movie and TV reactions and reviews. And for The Struggle is Real, I've been April, and I'll see you real soon.